You thought the anxiety in your chest was yours. But what if it was your home's? This wasn't simply your restless mind. This was your environment carrying the tension for you. Jung hinted at this when he observed that we don't live in rooms, we live in psychological atmospheres. Your house, your apartment, even your unremarkable bedroom can become the container that absorbs your unease so you can continue functioning. Because anxiety is never just internal, it is distributed. It moves through systems, through families, through groups, through spaces. A room can hold the vibration of conflict long after voices go silent. A hallway can remember arguments you've forgotten. A bed can carry the echo of every sleepless night you've endured. And here is the paradox. Your surroundings often hold the very dread you cannot face directly. Jung saw this in his patients who felt haunted by their own homes. He discovered that what they were sensing wasn't paranormal, but profoundly psychological, unconscious content projected outward, saturating the environment, then feeding back into the individual, a cycle of containment and contagion. You think I am anxious in this house. But sometimes the truth is the reverse. This house is anxious so that you don't have to be. Your psyche delegates the unbearable to the walls, the furniture, the shadows in the corners. It's a survival tactic, a displacement that allows you to carry on with the business of living. Yet, here lies the danger. What your house carries for you, it also whispers back to you. The container is not neutral. The environment becomes an amplifier, a mirror, a subtle manipulator of your nervous system. Jung called this unconscious participation mystique, the fusion between psyche and setting where boundaries blur. And so, before you know it, you are shaped not only by your thoughts, but by the invisible mood of the space you inhabit. The house that protects you also imprisons you. The room that calms you also suffocates you. The anxious walls become your second skin. That is where we must begin, with the recognition that your surroundings are not passive. They are psychological agents, storing what you cannot hold and reflecting back what you most fear. Jung once treated a man whose suffering did not live in his bloodstream alone. It lived in his rooms. This man appeared ordinary, polite, respectable. Yet he described his home with words more suited to a battlefield. The walls press, the furniture glares, the silence stalks. At first Jung suspected exaggeration, even poetic flourish, but then he visited. He stepped into the man's parlor and felt it himself, a pressure, heavy and unyielding, as if the very air had memorized decades of arguments and would not release them. Jung realized that the patient's psyche had colonized the space. The house had become a projection screen for unconscious contents, unspoken rage, secret grief, unresolved betrayals. Instead of dissolving, these psychic forces condensed into the environment and began to radiate back. Because this is how the unconscious works, what we cannot bear internally, we distribute externally. We put it on partners, on society, even on walls. Jung called this process projection and warned that if left unrecognized, projections gain autonomy. They act as if they are alive. The man's house had become such an autonomous field, charged with what he could not face within. Notice the chain. Because the psyche represses, the house absorbs. Because the house absorbs, the house radiates. Because the house radiates, the man reabsorbs his own shadow, disguised as atmosphere. A loop without escape. No wonder his anxiety deepened. He was not merely fighting his inner demons, he was walking through their shrine every day. And here is the terrifying discovery. The more sensitive you are, the more porous this loop becomes. Jung observed that empaths, those who already function as emotional shock absorbers for others, are especially vulnerable. Their nervous systems are like tuning forks, vibrating in resonance with the emotional charge of a room. Such individuals may think their exhaustion is personal weakness, when in truth they are drowning in collective residue, family conflict lingering in furniture, ancestral shame woven into the curtains, unspoken grief trapped in the silence of the bedroom. This is why Jung called certain environments psychological fields. A home can act like an organism with moods, appetites, even shadow. It doesn't just shelter you, it shapes you. And sometimes it begins to consume you. The patient recovered only when he recognized that his house was not haunted by ghosts, but by his own unconscious. He moved, yes, but more importantly, he performed the inner work of reclamation. He withdrew his projections, faced the shadow they embodied, and the suffocating atmosphere dissolved. The rooms went quiet. The silence became breathable. This case was not isolated. Jung noted it repeatedly. The psyche externalizes its conflicts, and the environment becomes charged with them. What begins as protection ends as possession. And so we must ask, what has your home absorbed for you? To understand why your house can feel anxious, you must first grasp the chain of influence: symbol, perception, body chemistry. Jung taught that every object in our environment is more than material, it is psychic. He wrote that the psyche creates symbols, and the symbols in turn shape the psyche. What you see on your nightstand, your desk, your kitchen counter is never neutral. It is a symbol charged with meaning, often unconscious. Because symbols trigger memory, because memory shapes appraisal, because appraisal dictates physiology. A single unpaid bill sitting untouched on your table is not paper. It is a condensed symbol of failure, risk, and survival. The eyes catch it, the unconscious translates it, and before thought has a chance to intervene, the body is already bracing. Shoulders tense, breath shallows, cortisol flows. Jung documented this process clinically. Patients who seemed irrationally anxious often lived in spaces cluttered with unresolved reminders, letters unsent, gifts from former lovers, family relics bound to shame. The psyche externalized the conflict, then recoiled at its own reflection. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what Jung intuited. Robert Sapolsky's research shows that the brain does not wait for conscious thought. Perception alone can trigger stress circuitry. When you glance at the laptop on your bed, your nervous system doesn't parse context. It simply detects unfinished labor, and the sympathetic system surges. This explains why some people cannot relax even in their own homes. Their houses are constructed as altars to their shadow, piles of unread books that accuse them of ignorance, clothes from a body they no longer inhabit, devices buzzing with other people's demands. And here is the paradox. The very objects that were meant to serve you become instruments of domination. Jung warned that what is repressed returns with a vengeance, often disguised. A room becomes restless not because it hates you, but because it mirrors the parts of you you refuse to see. So when you say, "I can't sleep," it may not be your insomnia at all. It may be the stack of unfinished obligations looming on the nightstand, whispering into your nervous system all night long. The house is not passive. It is a co-author of your state. And unless you reclaim authorship, it will continue to write anxiety into your biology. The most dangerous battlefield is not the workplace or the crowded street. It is the small square of wood beside your bed. The nightstand, humble, unnoticed, often functions as a psychic altar. Upon it you pile obligations, the half-read book that accuses you of ignorance, the unopened letter that hums with financial threat, the work laptop whispering of unfinished tasks. These are not objects. They are symbols, each one carrying a psychic charge. Because you do not go to bed alone, you go to bed surrounded by silent judges. Jung wrote that what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. The unfinished obligations you refuse to face in daylight appear in your bedroom as insomnia, shallow breath, restless dreams. Your nervous system, trying to sleep, receives a nightly sermon. You are behind. You are failing. You are unsafe. This is why some of you wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, unable to identify a clear cause. It is not simply anxiety, it is training. Night after night, the objects by your bed condition your body to associate the sanctuary of rest with the vigilance of unfinished duty. You are being taught panic in the very place you seek peace. Jung's patients described this phenomenon without realizing it. They would say, "I feel watched at night," Or, I wake up as if someone is scolding me. Jung understood. It was not a ghost, but the psychic weight of neglected tasks, condensed into objects and projected outward. So here is the rule. Your nightstand should hold only two symbols, a lamp for illumination and a vessel of water for renewal. Light and life, enough to soothe the unconscious into rest. Everything else belongs in drawers, in bins, in exile from the sleeping body. Because what you see last before closing your eyes and first upon waking speaks directly to the unconscious. And the unconscious does not debate, it obeys. Rearrange this small altar and you will feel the difference immediately. Sleep becomes less an arena of judgment and more a descent into silence. The bedroom becomes what Jung called a psychological container, a space that holds the self rather than accuses it. Your nervous system does not need more caffeine or more discipline. It needs a nightstand that whispers safety instead of panic. If the bedroom trains your nervous system in panic, the kitchen trains it in addiction. Look at your countertops. For many, they have become shrines, altars not to nourishment but to stimulation. The energy drink can waiting for the next hit, the sugar bowl glowing with false promise, the coffee machine humming like a priest of productivity. These are not conveniences. They are ritual objects designed to spike your dopamine, then abandon you in the trough of the crash. Jung warned that what we worship in secret becomes our god, and many modern homes have quietly enthroned caffeine and sugar as household deities. You don't bow before them, but your nervous system does. Each morning before breath or silence, you reach for the chalice of stimulation. The body learns, I am not safe without this substance. Because the unconscious does not distinguish between religious symbol and consumer object. Both are charged with psychic energy. Both carry expectation, hope, dependence. The candy jar in the center of the kitchen is not innocent. It is a totem that conditions the entire family to chase peaks of artificial energy, followed by valleys of irritability and shame. And here is the darker chain. Because you see the object, your body anticipates the reward. Because you anticipate the reward, dopamine spikes prematurely. Because dopamine spikes without fulfillment, the crash deepens. The cycle repeats, and soon your kitchen no longer represents sustenance, but volatility. A place meant for grounding becomes a laboratory of nervous agitation. Jung observed this same pattern in his patients long before the neuroscience was clear. He noted that environments saturated with stimulants became psychological traps, reinforcing compulsions rather than nourishing life. Modern research confirms it. Visual exposure to addictive cues alone is enough to alter blood sugar and cortisol. So what is the antidote? Replace the altar. Do not remove without replacing, for the unconscious hates a vacuum. A fruit bowl on the counter, a pitcher of water within reach, a protein option visible before the sugar calls your name. Simple substitutions alter the symbolism. The kitchen shifts from casino to sanctuary. Because the psyche doesn't just eat food, it eats symbols. And when the symbols change, the nervous system changes with them. Your kitchen should whisper, you are already stable. Not, you must chase stability with another hit. Now we enter the living room, the supposed heart of gathering. But for many, it is no longer a hearth of connection. It is a shrine to the screen. The television, the endless scroll, the autoplay news cycle. A glowing rectangle that Jung would have recognized as a modern archetype, the devouring eye. Because you do not simply watch the screen watches you, pulls you, shapes you. Its flood of novelty hijacks your attention until your very nervous system forgets how to rest. Because novelty is not neutral. Each new headline, each flashing thumbnail sends a jolt to the orienting reflex, the brain's ancient alarm that says something might matter for survival. Your body leans forward, your breath shortens, your posture folds into vigilance, and the more you consume, the less you digest. Jung warned of this danger long before digital media existed. He wrote that when archetypal images are presented without conscious mediation, they overwhelm the ego and possess it. The screen does precisely this. It pours unfiltered collective images, disaster, violence, spectacle, into your psychic field. And because the unconscious cannot always separate symbol from event, your body reacts as if each crisis is yours. This is why after an evening of relaxing television, you feel not restored, but strangely hollow, tense, irritable. Your nervous system has been trained in vigilance, not rest. The living room, designed as a site of community, becomes instead a training ground for chronic stress. So what is to be done? Not abstinence, but friction. Jung often counseled patients to interpose a symbolic act between impulse and action. For the modern home, this means placing distance between the hand and the remote. Store it in another room. Make the screen require a choice, not a reflex. Even 90 seconds of intentional breathing before pressing on alters the ritual. You remind the unconscious, I am sovereign here. I choose when to enter the field of images. The living room must be reclaimed as an arena of dialogue, story, and silence. Otherwise, the doom portal becomes the dominant archetype in the home, colonizing the collective nervous system of the entire family. The screen is not evil, but if it remains unmediated, it becomes what Jung called a God we no longer recognize as God. Not every danger in your home glows with electricity or rattles with sound. Some dangers sit quietly, wrapped in ribbons, smiling with the mask of generosity. The gifts you resent? Perhaps it is the sweater from a parent whose love has always come laced with criticism. Perhaps it is the decorative trinket from a partner who betrayed you, still perched on the shelf, because throwing it away feels like treason. Perhaps it is the heirloom you never wanted but felt compelled to accept, a piece of someone else's unfinished life now living in your living room. Jung warned that objects can carry psychic charge far heavier than their physical weight. He observed that when symbolic items are received without genuine consent, they become tokens of bondage, anchors tying the psyche to unresolved relational dynamics. Because these objects do more than sit. They speak. They whisper scripts into your nervous system. You owe me. You must endure. You are not free. And every time your eyes glance across them, even unconsciously, your body rehearses the same cycle of guilt, resentment, fatigue. This is why some people feel mysteriously drained in their own homes. They are not simply tired. They are in a field of language created by obligation. Their walls speak in someone else's voice. Their shelves echo with someone else's demands. But the psyche does not tolerate contradiction forever. Jung described how the unlived life of another, imposed upon you, creates what he called shadow inflation. You feel heavy, trapped, vaguely resentful, but unable to name why. The truth is simple. You are living with symbols that do not belong to you. The antidote is not destruction, but ritual release. Thank the object for what it represented, then return it to the stream of life. Donation, burial, even fire if needed. The gratitude severs guilt. The release restores sovereignty. Because until you do, your home is not truly your own. It is a stage where other people's dramas continue long after the actors have left. And ask yourself this: if Jung were to walk through your rooms today, how many of the objects he touched would vibrate not with your life, but with the unresolved psychic debts of others? Every home hides a museum, and every museum hides a crypt. Look closely at the objects you have kept not out of love, but out of inertia. The hoodie from the partner who betrayed you, the photographs from a friendship that ended in silence, the trophies from a career that once defined you, but now feels like someone else's life. These are not keepsakes. They are trauma time capsules, fragments of unlived selves sealed into matter. Jung warned that what we refuse to integrate does not disappear. It waits. He described this as the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious tendency to recreate old suffering until it is finally faced. These objects function as portals into that compulsion. Each glance, each touch, pulls you back into an identity you thought you had escaped. Because memory is not passive, to the nervous system, a relic of betrayal is not a neutral object, it is a trigger. The ex-lover's letter does not say, "I once loved you." It says, "You are still abandoned." The diploma from a career you left in shame does not say, "You once succeeded." It says, "You are still a failure." The psyche does not experience these items as history, it experiences them as present tense. And here is the cruel paradox. You keep them to remember, but in remembering, you prevent forgetting. You tell yourself these things mark your story, but in truth, they repeat the story again and again every time your eyes fall upon them. Jung observed in case after case that patients who clung to such objects were unable to progress in individuation. They had anchored themselves to identities that no longer served their evolution. The soul, he wrote, demands a continual death and rebirth. Yet these souvenirs freeze the soul in a perpetual yesterday. So the work is not simply tidying, it is ritual exorcism. You must ask each relic, does this object witness my growth or does it bind me to a corpse of myself? If it binds, it must go, not as denial, but as release. Burn it, bury it, or offer it away. In doing so, you affirm, I will not live as a ghost in my own house. Because your home is either a sanctuary for your becoming or a mausoleum of who you once were. And no nervous system can thrive in a mausoleum. There is a monster in your home and it does not roar, it rustles. It is the pile of unopened mail, unsorted receipts, user manuals, tax documents, to-do lists, scribbled and abandoned. At first glance, these are ordinary papers, but Jung would insist, there is no such thing as an ordinary pile. Every unfinished item carries psychic charge. Together, they form a purgatory of obligations that bleeds your willpower dry. Here is the mechanism. Because the task is ambiguous, the psyche cannot close the loop. Because the loop remains open, the unconscious rehearses it endlessly. Because the unconscious rehearses, attention fragments, energy scatters, and anxiety multiplies. This is what psychologists now call the Zeigarnik effect, the mind's compulsion to fixate on incomplete tasks. But Jung had already seen it clinically. Patients who drowned in anxiety often lived surrounded by ambiguous reminders, never clearly resolved, never clearly abandoned. You think the pile is still, but it vibrates. It hums with the accusation, you are behind, you are disorganized, you are failing. Your nervous system hears this message every time you walk by, even if you look away. And because the psyche hates contradiction, it wages a secret war. Part of you wants to forget. Another part rehearses the unfinished tasks endlessly. This constant inner tension is why you feel mysteriously exhausted after doing nothing more than passing the kitchen counter. Jung taught that individuation requires discrimination, the ability to separate what belongs to you from what does not, what must be done from what must be released. Without this clarity, the unconscious inflates the trivial into the monumental. A single unopened envelope becomes the symbol of your entire inadequacy. The solution is not heroic productivity, but sacred sorting. 3 trays: action, calendar, archive. If it can be done in 5 minutes, do it now. If it belongs to a date, schedule it. If it is reference only, file it. Every item placed consciously weakens the spell of the pile. Because the pile is not about paper, it is about power. Either it rules you as a scattered tyrant, or you rule it as a sovereign. Ask yourself, does your desk resemble the psychic clarity of an individuated self, or the chaotic altar of a divided one? Anxiety does not always arrive as a scream. Sometimes it hums. The buzzing light that flickers overhead, the refrigerator's low growl, the faint tick of a clock whose hands move slower than your heart, the endless ping of notifications punctuating silence. These are what I call micro-noises, tiny irritants that seem harmless, but condition your nervous system into constant vigilance. Jung wrote that what is not made conscious returns as fate. In this case, what is not made conscious returns as tension, tight shoulders, shallow breath, restless sleep. You may think you have simply grown irritable. In truth, your body has been trained by 1,000 tiny alarms to never stand down. Because sound is the oldest language. Long before words, our ancestors listened for the snap of a twig, the rustle of a predator in the grass. Your nervous system still treats unexpected noise as a survival signal. A phone ping is registered no differently than a twig snapping in the forest. The body startles, prepares, braces. Multiply this by dozens of alerts, humming appliances, and dripping faucets, and you live in a state of perpetual micro-startle. Jung observed that highly sensitive individuals, those with nervous systems tuned like fine instruments, are particularly vulnerable. They are not imagining their exhaustion. They are absorbing the full weight of an environment that never fully quiets. The tragedy is that silence, the very medicine the psyche craves, becomes inaccessible. The hum fills the gaps, and the soul cannot breathe. The solution is deliberate sound inventory. Once a week, sit in your home with everything off. Listen. What hums? What drips? What ticks? Every small repair, every silenced notification is not trivial. It is psychological hygiene. Add white noise if needed, not to numb but to soothe, replacing chaos with coherence. Because your nervous system is not infinite, each noise is a tax, and when you pay 1,000 small taxes every day, you wonder why you are bankrupt by nightfall. Jung would say, reclaim silence, and you reclaim yourself. Now that the 7 hidden saboteurs have been named, you need a ritual, not a project, not a renovation, but a concentrated act of psychic reclamation. I call it the 15-minute home exorcism. Why 15 minutes? Because the psyche responds to rhythm more than duration. A brief, repeatable ritual creates more transformation than a rare, exhausting purge. Jung himself noted that small, conscious acts, repeated, constellate the unconscious far more powerfully than grand gestures performed once. The ritual moves in sequence, each step dissolving one symbolic trap. The nightstand reset. 2 objects only, lamp and water, everything else hidden. You declare to the unconscious, sleep is sanctuary, not trial. The counter swap, replace sugar and stimulants with fruit, protein, or simple water. The altar of compulsion becomes the altar of sustenance. The remote relocation, move the television remote out of arm's reach. Insert friction into the reflex. You tell the archetype of the screen, I enter only by choice. Think plus, release one object. Take a single resented gift or unwanted heirloom. Speak gratitude aloud, then remove it from your space. Obligation dissolves, sovereignty returns. Box one-time capsule relic. Choose an object bound to an old self. Place it in a sealed box hidden from sight or destroy it if needed. You proclaim, I am not a mausoleum. Paper triage, 5 minutes only. Sort the pile into action, calendar, archive. Close at least one loop. The nervous system feels closure instantly. Sound sweep. Turn off one hum, silence one notification, or add one sound of coherence. White noise, gentle music, or true silence. The body exhales. Do not underestimate the power of this sequence. In less than a quarter of an hour, you have confronted each category of psychic leakage. You have moved from unconscious victim to conscious curator. And your body will feel it immediately. Less tension in the jaw, deeper breath in the chest, a quiet sense that the house is no longer against you, but with you. Because this is not about tidiness, it is about re-symbolization. Each step reclaims a fragment of your psyche projected into objects, turning your home from adversary to ally. Jung once observed that when a patient moved a single chair but did so consciously, the dream life shifted for weeks. Why? Because the outer act mirrors the inner one. Change your environment, and the unconscious responds in kind. 15 minutes, 7 actions, 1 exorcism. Do it tonight and watch how the silence begins to breathe again. The exorcism is not a one-time spectacle. It is a rhythm. Because the unconscious does not stay tamed, it regathers, it accretes, it seeps back into corners. Jung warned that the shadow, once integrated, must be tended like a fire, neglected, and it either dies or burns the house down. So you need rhythms, not resolutions. Weekly, every Sunday, 15 minutes. Choose one room only. Do not attempt to cleanse the whole house. Select a single battlefield, the nightstand, the counter, the desk. Reclaim it. The repetition builds a psychological association. Sunday is sovereignty. Monthly. Once a month, confront one legacy item, an old relic, an inherited gift, a trauma time capsule. Thank it, release it, or consciously choose to keep it with awareness. This is individuation in practice, deciding what is truly yours and what is inherited illusion. Seasonal. At each equinox or solstice, perform a sound and light renewal. Replace one bulb with a warmer tone, silence one persistent hum, and notice how your body responds. These shifts are small but symbolically potent. They remind the unconscious that time moves and you are moving with it. Relational. Once every few weeks, invite someone you trust to join the ritual, not to clean, but to witness. Jung often emphasized the role of the other in transformation. What we do in secret rarely holds as powerfully as what we do with another's eyes upon us. When a friend sees you reclaim your space, the act anchors in collective psyche. Because maintenance is not housekeeping, it is soul-keeping. You are not just arranging objects, you are aligning inner life with outer form. The rhythm itself becomes medicine, and the beauty is this. Over time, the house begins to anticipate you. The silence becomes easier to recover. The walls no longer press in, but breathe out. You feel, perhaps for the first time, that your environment does not feed on your nervous system, but steadies it. Your home becomes what Jung called a psychological container, not a battlefield of projections, but a vessel that holds, protects, and amplifies your individuation. Even the most powerful rituals are vulnerable to sabotage. Jung observed that whenever the psyche makes progress toward individuation, resistance emerges, what he called the counter-movement of the unconscious. If you know the traps, you can step around them instead of falling back in. Pitfall 1. Perfection, panic. You attempt to transform the entire house in one feverish sweep. You burn out, collapse, and the unconscious whispers, "See? You failed again." The cure, humility. Choose the smallest possible unit of transformation, a single nightstand, one shelf, one drawer. Jung wrote that the psyche respects symbolic gestures more than monumental efforts. Pitfall 2. Sentimentality spiral. You touch an object and instantly hear the voice of guilt. But they gave this to you. You can't discard it. You mistake loyalty for imprisonment. The cure, ritual gratitude. Thank the object aloud, then release it. Gratitude severs the chain of guilt and allows the soul to breathe. Pitfall 3. Reclutter by proxy. You reclaim your space only for a partner, child, or roommate to reintroduce chaos. This is not merely a household squabble, it is the archetypal struggle between order and entropy. The cure. Declare sanctuary zones, a nightstand, a desk, a single shelf that is inviolably yours. Even one corner of sovereignty is enough to anchor the psyche. Pitfall 4. Shadow substitution. You remove the anxious object but replace it unconsciously with another of equal weight. A new stack of unopened letters, another drawer of relics. The cure, pause. Ask the symbolic question each time you place something. Does this serve my becoming, or does it bind me to repetition? Jung insisted that individuation is not about becoming flawless, but conscious. You will falter. You will relapse. But each relapse is itself material for awareness. The difference between regression and growth lies in whether you notice. So do not fear the pitfalls. They are not evidence of failure. They are evidence that the unconscious is alive, that transformation is underway. Step around them with awareness, and the path becomes clearer each time. You may believe this work is private, confined to the walls of your own dwelling, but Jung warned that nothing in the psyche remains isolated. The environment you inhabit becomes the silent third partner in every relationship. Because when your baseline arousal drops, your conversations change. No longer keyed to hypervigilance, your voice softens, your gaze steadies, your capacity for listening deepens. Partners who once braced against your tension sense the shift instantly, though they may not name it. Children grow calmer, friends linger longer, even animals rest easier. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The psyche creates reality every day. Only very few people see it. Your home is part of that daily creation." A cluttered, anxious space produces a relational dance of irritability, projection, and distance. A reclaimed symbolic space produces dialogue, patience, even intimacy. I have seen couples who fought endlessly in one room discover, after a single ritual of clearing, that the quarrel evaporated. Nothing resolved in words, yet something dissolved in atmosphere. The room no longer carried the archetype of conflict, so their bodies no longer rehearsed it. Because the house is not neutral, it carries patterns, and those patterns leak into every interaction. Jung called this participation mystique, the fusion between environment and psyche, where two people are not only relating to each other, but also to the charged field around them. So understand this: every object you keep, every hum you silence, every relic you release does not just liberate you, it alters the choreography of your relationships. You are no longer unconsciously dragging others into the maze of your cluttered psyche. You are inviting them into a field of coherence, and coherence is contagious. Now you know the 7 hidden saboteurs, and you have practiced the exorcism. But Jung taught that transformation is never a single moment. It is a process of rhythm, death, and rebirth. To anchor this process, I give you a map: the 7-day Nervous System Challenge. 1 act each day, each designed to reclaim sovereignty from the anxious house. Day 1. The Nightstand 2-object Rule. Strip it bare, lamp and water only. Sleep becomes a sanctuary of symbols, not a courtroom of judgment. Day 2. The Counter Swap. Remove the sugar idol, the caffeine shrine. Replace with fruit, protein, or water. Your kitchen ceases to be a casino of dopamine and becomes an altar of nourishment. Day 3. The Remote Relocation. Banish the reflex. Place the remote in another room. Pause, breathe, choose before the screen devours. You remind the unconscious, I decide when to enter the flood of images. Day 4. Thank plus release 1 obligation object. Choose a resented gift or heirloom. Speak gratitude, then release. You sever the invisible cord of guilt and stand again as sovereign. Day 5. Box 1 Time Capsule Relic. Confront the past. 1 hoodie, 1 letter, 1 photograph that binds you to an old self. Place it in a sealed box or destroy it. You proclaim, I will not live as a mausoleum of yesterday. Day 6. Paper triage. 5 minutes only. Sort into action, calendar, archive. 1 loop closed, 1 burden lifted, 1 corner of purgatory dissolved. Day 7. Sonic sweep. Silence 1 hum, disable 1 notification, or create 1 zone of coherence. Give your body the medicine of true silence. 7 days, 7 acts, not chores, but rituals. Each a conscious dialogue with your unconscious, each a declaration that you are not a prisoner of your environment, but its author. At the end of these 7 days, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, which act released the most tension? Which object fought hardest to stay? Which silence felt most alive? For Jung, these reflections mattered as much as the acts themselves, because the psyche, once it has tasted freedom, begins to demand more of it. The challenge is not about tidying, it is about individuation, the creation of a house that breathes in rhythm with your true self. Now we return to where we began, with the paradox that your house is anxious, so that you don't have to be. But here is the deeper truth. The danger was never the anxiety itself. The danger was your unconscious collusion with it. By leaving objects unresolved, by tolerating hums and piles and relics, you allowed your home to speak in the language of panic. Integration means remembering what Jung never tired of reminding his patients. What is unconscious controls you. What is made conscious liberates you. Every nightstand cleared, every pile sorted, every relic released is not about tidiness. It is about withdrawing projections and reclaiming psychic energy. Because you now see the chain, the symbol trains the nervous system. The nervous system trains your relationships. The relationships train your destiny. Change the symbol, and the chain is broken. A lamp and water on the nightstand whisper peace instead of judgment. A fruit bowl on the counter murmurs stability instead of compulsion. A silence restored in the living room hums presence instead of vigilance. These are not small acts. They are acts of individuation, the alchemy of turning unconscious bondage into conscious sovereignty. And now I give you this call. Begin. Choose one object today and set it free. Comment below what you released and notice how many others are walking this same path beside you. In sharing, you strengthen not just yourself, but the collective psyche. For Jung insisted that each act of consciousness radiates outward into the field of humanity. The danger was never that your house carried your anxiety. The danger was that you refused to notice. The gift is that now you do. Use this awareness not as burden, but as medicine. Reclaim your home as a psychological container for your becoming. Let the silence breathe. Let the walls support. Let the objects mirror only what is truly yours. Because the danger isn't that your home remembers too much. The danger is failing to build a conscious relationship with what it remembers. Do that, and your home becomes not a tomb of anxiety, but a sanctuary of individuation.